As we search for the final resting place of Texas Ranger and outlaw Scott Cooley, we reviewed his violent but short life. William Scott Cooley was born in Arkansas in 1855. By 1860, the family had moved to Jack County, Texas. Newspaper reported that the Cooley boys, Scott and his brothers, were involved in skirmishes with the Indians and killed Indians on more than one occasion. Scalping was involved in this. In 1870, Scott's father was killed, and at least one son revenged his death the next day by killing the man responsible for their father's death. Cooley participated in at least 2 cattle drives to Kansas. In 1874, he enlisted in Company D of the Texas Rangers. The thing we remember most about Scott in his rangering days, they ran into some Comanches about 3 miles up Elm Creek. The Comanches chased them all the way back to the ranger camp, and then the Rangers turned and chased the Comanches, finally catching and killing most of them. One of the ones they captured was this chief named Little Bull. I'm not sure he was a chief, but he was the leader of the group. They took him back to Austin, and there Scott somehow got a hold of this Indian named Little Bull and put him on display to the public at a local opera house in Austin for a 25-cent admission. Well, Scott got in trouble for that. Ranger Steele found out about it and ordered the event to be canceled. I think that's the time that Scott, who had been a corporal up until August of 1874, at which time he remained on the force as a private. He received his discharge in December of 1874 and rented a farm in Menard County. It was then he became involved in the Mason County War, which was also known as the Hoodoo War, possibly named Hoodoo because of masked vigilantes or because it brought bad luck to many who were killed. But really all that war was a conflict of cultures, the Americans versus the Germans. Both accused each other of stealing cattle. There was also confusion over branding laws. Your brand in one county could be someone else's in the other county. Other theories and accusations around the culture and cattle were at the heart of the matter. Vigilante justice had taken over the Mason County cattle rustling enterprise, and Sheriff John Clark and Ranger Lieutenant Dan Roberts were outgunned. Consequently, they were forced to let the rustlers and ranchers sort it out themselves. At the time of the Mason County War, Cooley was described as a short, solid man, looking like he might have some Cherokee blood in him. Cooley's entry into the feud came when the vigilantes dispatched his friend and suspected rustler Tim Williamson while he was being led to his bond hearing. Cooley, upon hearing of the killing of his best friend, sat down and cried with grief. Cooley then retaliated by killing and scalping Deputy Tom Cooley, in whose custody Williamson was gunned down. It was also reported that Cooley fired 6 shots into his victim and stabbed him 4 times before taking his scalp. The killings were too much for Major John B. Jones, who led the Rangers into Mason County, determined to end the violence. Meanwhile, Cooley, who had teamed up with John P. Ringo, a.k.a. Long John, later of Tombstone fame, was involved in the killing of a hide inspector. Cooley, along with Ringo, were eventually arrested for their involvement in the Mason County War, and Cooley for killing Sheriff Cooley. After being transferred from one venue to another, Cooley was eventually freed by a mob. Following the jailbreak, Cooley hid out at a friend's ranch in Llano County for approximately 2 weeks. His next stop was Fredericksburg. After dining there, he hit the road but became suddenly ill. He went to or was taken to a friend's ranch where he shortly died. Cause of death was listed as one source as a brain congestion and by another as having been poisoned by a woman who put something in his drink. We drove to the Miller's Creek Cemetery north of Blanco, a burial ground established in 1857 under spreading oak trees. Driving up to the cemetery, we were struck by how peaceful his final resting place was compared to the pain and violence. Scott Cooley is buried under a grave-sized slab of concrete with the simple words, Scott Cooley, 1852 to 1876, Texas Ranger. Cooley led a violent life, beginning with the witnessing of his father's death, fighting and scalping Indians, going on cattle drives, and joining the Rangers when he was 19. It is unknown how many Indians may have died by his hand. He killed at least 2 men in the Mason County War. He was dead at 24 under suspicious circumstances. Scott Cooley did what he had to survive and fight for what he believed in. Was he a product of his time or a man who needed the adrenaline rush of violence?